Hello, everyone. Welcome to 10-Minute Elections. Today is Saturday, February 13th, 2021. As I wish you a happy early Valentine's Day, a happy Valentine's Day, or a happy belated Valentine's Day, depending on when y'all are watching this. This is going to be a short video, or so I say. Generally, when I say this is going to be a short video, I think some of my longest videos on the channel have been the ones that I say this is going to be a fairly short video, but I am going to try and keep this one within 10 minutes. Because the thing when I record these videos is I always think, oh, is this really enough content to make a video? I'm not worried. I don't think this is even going to go 5 minutes. And then it ends up going, 15, 20 minutes when I didn't think I had enough to go on about for 5. So yeah, I surprised myself like that. But anyway, I can count the number of subs we are away from 50 on my two hands. So just tell your friends, tell anyone you think would be interested. And I know I keep saying that Rust Belt video is going to be out. Y'all voted on it. It's coming. But the impeachment trial just wrapped up, and that's kind of big. I'm not one of those YouTubers that's gonna tease a video forever. Or at least that's not my intention. Oh, without recording it, I'm gonna get that one out for you. Maybe a 50 subscriber special. I don't know. Maybe it's a stretch. But anyway, so today's vote. Donald Trump was acquitted for the second time, although this vote was closer. 57 guilty, 43 not guilty. It takes 67 guilty votes to convict a president. So, every Democrat voted guilty. The only one that we were really watching here were West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who really did nothing to indicate that he would acquit, and then Kyrsten Sinema, who somewhat did. She refused to talk about how she was leaning on the trial, her thoughts on the trial, anything like that. She just downright refused. Now, Kyrsten Sinema often refuses to talk about, which way she's leaning on votes. It's just not what she does. But this one especially, she was staying especially mum, even for Kyrsten Sinema, which is very mum. And earlier, she was shown chatting with a group of Republican senators, which led some to speculate that she might be a wild card in the voting. She did not end up being that. She went back to her party. Now, before I get into some of the Republican votes, the 7 Republicans that voted yes, I want to talk about how today there was a witness vote, because witnesses were not expected at this impeachment trial. This impeachment trial, going into today, was expected to wrap up today, around the time that it did, with a final vote. But the lead manager Raskin ended up requesting that GOP representative from Washington State, Jamie Herrera Beutler, I'm not sure if that was pronounced correctly, but that she be called to testify. And the Trump's defense team responded that if Herrera Beutler was allowed to testify, that they had something like 301 witnesses that they wanted sworn depositions from. So the vote ended up being 55 to 45 to allow witnesses. No one really expected this vote to happen, and it caught especially Majority Leader Schumer off guard. Every Democrat did vote for the motion, including Manchin and Sinema, of course, plus Senators Romney, Sass, not Pat Toomey, Romney, Sass, Murkowski, Collins, and Lindsey Graham, although this was to indicate support for the Trump side witnesses being called, not anything in terms of endorsing the testimony of Herrera Beutler. Because remember, this wasn't a vote on Herrera Beutler specifically that was taken in the Senate. This was a vote on allowing witnesses overall. And it passed 55 to 45, but an agreement was reached between the two sides that Herrera Beutler's statement would be placed into the record, and that she would not be called to testify as an official witness. She was basically talking about kind of her conversation with Kevin McCarthy while all this was happening, and kind of where Mike Pence was and all that. So, the 7 Republican guilties. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. This one was pretty much expected, although there were some sources saying she was actually leaning towards acquittal after hearing the Trump defense team's arguments. That did not pan out. She has been calling for Trump's resignation not explicitly removal, but resignation specifically, ever since January 6th. And it definitely wasn't certain, wasn't 100%, but I don't think it really genuinely surprised anyone when she voted guilty. Mitt Romney of Utah, yeah, this one was always going to happen. Mitt Romney was always seen as a lock. Mitt Romney, at least to our knowledge, was never not going to convict. He was the only Republican senator to vote to convict Donald Trump's first impeachment trial, and he was regarded as the most likely of any Republican senator to convict again. Also, to note, Mitt Romney was the only Republican senator to convict that is not either retiring or just won re-election in 2020, besides Lisa Murkowski. But Lisa Murkowski already won after losing her own primary. I've talked about this multiple times on the channel, but in an election that cannot be described as anything but pure Alaska, she lost the Republican primary in 2010 to Joe Miller, then won the election not even as a third party candidate. Joe Lieberman won his 2006 re-election in Connecticut as a third party candidate. She didn't win as a third party candidate. She ran and won as a write-in candidate. She was nowhere on the ballot, and she managed to win this election. So yeah, Lisa Murkowski does what she wants. Ben Sasse just won his re-election. He's been pretty critical of Trump. He has voted with Trump a large portion of the time. He voted to acquit him and not call witnesses in his first impeachment trial. He voted to confirm Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. He has voted on Donald Trump with a whole lot of policy measures, which is unsurprising because Ben Sasse is actually a fairly conservative Republican. If Joe Biden were to get something through on a 60-40 basis, Ben Sasse may or may not be one of those 10 senators. Like, we know Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski would have to be two of those 10 senators. Ben Sasse, not really sure. Anyway, Ben Sasse votes to convict. That he has voted with Democrats on every motion so far on this impeachment trial, so it's not too surprising that he voted to convict. Bill Cassidy. This one was somewhat surprising because yesterday he was actually seen carrying the draft of a statement submitting his support for acquittal. So for him to actually turn around and convict president, especially or the former president, especially after voting against witnesses today, was surprising to some. This was really one of two surprising impeachment votes, but at least Bill Cassidy, in voting that the trial was constitutional, gave some indication of how he would vote, and people were not totally blindsided by his vote, unlike the vote of Richard Burr of North Carolina voting to convict. This is like what Tom Rice, the representative from South Carolina, did. He's a conservative Republican. No one really saw this coming. Now Richard Burr is retiring, so he doesn't really have electoral concerns. But either way, he, in a statement after his vote to convict, essentially said that he was one of the 44 senators that voted that the trial was unconstitutional. Every senator that voted that the trial was constitutional, plus Burr, ended up voting to convict. But he said in his statement he still does not believe that the trial was constitutional or that conviction was a constitutional remedy for Donald Trump's conduct. But he said specifically, he harped on that the Senate is a body of precedent. It is based on precedent. And so in Richard Burr's view, when that vote was taken and it was decided by the Senate that the trial was constitutional and could proceed, he viewed that as precedent. He viewed that as settled, and now it was time to, assuming that the trial was constitutional, because that's how the Senate voted, it was now time to judge the case solely on its merits. Now, this is actually very similar. I draw a parallel here between Burr's vote on impeachment and Lisa Murkowski's vote on Amy Coney Barrett. Murkowski said she objected to the nomination. She did not think that after seeing what happened to Merrick Garland, that a nomination should be entertained before the election. So she said, I'm sorry. So after she met, however, with Amy Coney Barrett and she heard her in hearings and whatnot, Lisa Murkowski did believe that Amy Coney Barrett was a qualified justice. So Murkowski voted against all of the procedural motions to advance Barrett's nomination. But Her logic was that in the end, the procedural votes had already happened. That the final Coney Barrett vote was about the justice, not the process. And so on the justice, Coney Barrett, she voted aye, even if on the process she voted no. That's another thing. People, you know, the Coney Barrett nomination passed 52 to 48. That was really 51 to 49 because all these procedural motions passed without Murkowski or Collins. So I know the final vote was at 52-48, but it was really Collins and Murkowski that were voting against it. In other words, if two other Republican senators had opposed the nomination, say, I don't really know where you would get those votes. Maybe, let's see, this was in the last Senate, so I'm gonna say Lamar Alexander and Rob Portman, I suppose. But if those two senators opposed it, I know that the final vote supposedly would have been 50-50, which means the nomination would have passed with Mike Pence's votes, but no, because Lisa Murkowski voted no. Yeah, this is an impeachment video, and I just spent multiple minutes talking about Amy Coney Barrett. Welcome to me. Anyway, Richard Burr ends up voting to convict, being the only senator to cross the line from his constitutionality vote. I already talked about Ben Sass, right? Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania. He will be retiring in 2022 after winning election in 2010, defeating Representative Joe Sestak, who narrowly defeated then incumbent Democratic, formerly Republican Senator Arlen Specter in the Democratic primary. Anyway, Toomey's retirement in 2022 leaves this seat wide open, and John Fetterman looks like an early favorite to take this seat. But in the meantime, Pat Toomey has been quite critical of Trump's conduct since January 6th, has voted with Democrats on all the motions in terms of impeachment, except for witnesses. He did not vote for witnesses, but he does end up voting to convict. And then the last one, Susan Collins. Now, Susan Collins is an interesting case. Obviously, on most votes, Susan Collins is the most likely Republican senator to vote with Democrats. But after January 6th, she was not as vocal as in terms of opposing Trump and his actions as a lot of the other moderate or anti-Trump senators. Granted, she did condemn them and whatnot, and she condemned Trump's conduct, but she was certainly not as vocal about it as, say, Lisa Murkowski, who was directly calling on Donald Trump to resign. However, in a move that didn't really surprise too many people, she did, despite this non-vocality, she did come around and vote with Democrats on all the motions, including, finally, to convict. One more thing to note, and this really isn't surprising, but no senator who voted to entertain the objections to the election results voted to convict. Of course, those being among those senators, some of Trump's fiercest defenders during this trial. Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, Ted Cruz of Texas, who met with Donald Trump to talk strategy, Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming, Rick Scott of Florida, etc., etc. So, again, all of these senators really not facing electoral concerns except Mitt Romney and Lisa Murkowski. Lisa Murkowski's won like this before, and she should be bolstered by Alaska's jungle primary and ranked choice voting system. If that ballot measure had not passed, I don't think Lisa Murkowski would be winning in 2022. I know she did it in 2010, but 2010 was a different time. And even as recently as 2010, 2012, you saw all sorts of state houses stay in Democratic or Republican hands in different states. Governorships crossed the aisle, all sorts of different senators. We had you had two Democrats from North Dakota, one from South Dakota, two from Montana, and two Republicans from Maine, Susan Collins and Olympia Snowe. I mean, it's a much more partisan environment now, and if the old system had still been in place in the state of Alaska, I think a primary challenger really could have taken advantage of that and potentially won a general election, although it's anyone's game in Alaska. The party lines are much more blurred, and it's a state where the rural areas go blue and the urban areas go red, or urban, quote unquote. But with that ranked choice voting, Lisa Murkowski should almost always garner enough of the vote to advance in the jungle primary to advance into the top 4 general election, and then certainly more a majority, especially if it's between her and like a Democrat. Even if it's like Al Gross, Lisa Murkowski is going to win that one. Okay. I know I said this would be a short video. Sure enough, it wasn't. I'm honestly just gonna stop saying that because it isn't working out too well for me. But a happy Galentine's, Valentine's, whatever you celebrate in this time of year. And I will see you guys soon for another video. I would have said future of the Rust Belt, but I think I said that 3 videos ago. I'll get around to it. Happy Valentine's Day. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there.